Hey guys, Robert here. I decided that I was not going to do a screen record of this image because I knew I was going to be working on it for hours and hours and hours, and it was going to be a crazy large file, and it would just melt my computer if I tried to record that process. Plus, I wanted to be able to try a lot of things and throw them away, and if I'm recording, it's a bit more of like, it's almost like someone's watching over my shoulder, and I want to constantly be doing the right thing and not wasting any time. And it kind of stunts my creativity in a weird sort of way because I don't take time to sit back and stare at it for a minute to decide what to do next. So anyway, I decided to not do a screen record. So instead, I am just going to run you through my layers. I haven't really planned this out, so I'm just going to start poking through and see what I find and talk through whatever's on my mind. So basically, I ended up saving 6 different files. So I would get to a point and be like, okay, it's starting to run my computer down, so I'm going to merge a bunch of layers and start another, save as version 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I'm just going to go back through here. That was version 6, version 5, version 4, version 3, 2, and 1. So this way down here is... Note that, in case that was confusing, I combined all of my different versions into one layer file so I could poke through and show you guys. So essentially, this is my pre-sketch. I know it is very glamorous and you are all intimidated by my painting skills, but the point was I was just kind of getting a body shape and pose, and obviously this is super rough, and I didn't want to spend forever doing all the little details of the eyes and the elbows and, like little whatever. I was just very quickly getting it down because I ended up, trying lots of different things before I settled on something. So I didn't want to commit too much time right away. So anyway, this was my pre-sketch. And then I threw this sort of red color down here. My size changed a bunch of times, so there's some empty space until later. So I started just throwing some textures and things back here just to get something on the canvas. And then I ended up working with this cave image by my friend Mike, and then just layering up different parts of it, trying to find a good balance of lights and darks, and knowing that this is going to be super blurred and pushed back. I just kind of needed some texture and grit back there so my canvas wasn't just a color. I wanted it to already kind of look like a cave. So, and note that, I didn't do these layers in this order. So, I mean, as I'm sure it was sort of all over the place. So let me dig into this folder. I'm normally a bit better about naming my files and layers and, so I can find things, but I was really just kind of going with the flow. So it's a bit haphazard. What are you going to do? So, oops, didn't end up going with that. So these are different pieces from the Monster Builder toolkit that I, used Puppet Warp and Regular Warp and Liquify, and just took the different pieces that I liked and started working them together, knowing that I was going to essentially, like, almost none of this is still in the final image. I basically just used kind of the pose and feel of it, but I end up painting so much on top of it that it's, completely different by the end. But this was a really great starting point to have the torso and the head and the mouth and all that. Like I don't know that I might have come up with this in the way it was built. And then I, towards the end, built upon it more and added more teeth and more kind of rings and sort of built my creature starting from the mouth and going from there. So then I just took a color I selected from the background. This is just a normal solid layer, and I put it over top and set it down to 85% opacity. So this is, now I can start painting on top of this, and I have some of the detail and bit back there, and then I can, kind of make it my own. And then I darkened it down a lot. It's just a brightness contrast layer. And so there we are, like that. I darkened it some more and started playing with, fog and separating things out. This arm is farther back in the picture, so it would be a little bit lighter, like there could be some fog between there and the mouth, so just to sort of separate that out. And I started painting in the face. From a distance, it looks pretty good, but once you get in there, it's pretty rough, just, you know, adding some more teeth and starting to play with, you know, maybe it has this circular, wrinkly motion coming out from the mouth. I knew I wanted the eyes to be glowy and sort of like a skull where there's like a black cavernous area. I did end up changing them later and making them more human-y, but kind of like bulbous eyes. Here's some more detail painting, just starting to flesh out the skin and figure out how things were going to flow. And some more fog. I knew I wanted to have this side be warm, like he was coming out of some sort of volcanic cavern. And then on the right side, there would be our little tiny hero with blue magic, because I really like to have opposing colors. And so then we threw some rocks in front of there. These later got replaced. Yeah, a lot of things changed as I went. There's that hand that I just kind of looked at the other one and, you know, picked colors from there and made it work. More fog. And I think I start brightening it up after I darken it down a bit, just because it was starting to look very flat and dark. So I just did some brightness contrast. More rocks. Okay, so that was my first, you know, file when things started getting like, okay, I have a lot of layers, I'm happy with it, so I'm going to merge the monster into one layer, you know, the foreground into one layer, so that when I start my next thing, I only have a few, but I, you know, if I need to go back, I still have it. So we'll turn on 2. And just go back up through the layers again. A lot of these are repeat layers, just because it is a duplicate file. So there's our monster, somewhat where it was. There's the face. So you can see I started adding in just a lot more painting. I knew I had this light coming from below. So, you know, I was constantly checking in on that and going, okay, well, you know, where is light coming from? Well, this mouth has some light, so it's going to cast light, you know, on here, on the back of these little mouthpieces. So just looking at all the different light sources and what would be highlighted and what would be shadowed. So somewhere in one of these layers, I added in the like kind of warmer highlights from below, which will continue to get played out throughout the image as I go. Okay, and just figure out what I was doing here. So this blue light will obviously make more sense later, but I knew there'd be blue light coming from here, so I was starting to mess with, you know, the different color temperatures. More fog. I'm also constantly, I keep a black layer up on top, just a solid black layer. Here, I'll just do it real quick to show you, to check values. So if I go like this, and then I just set this to color, actually, saturation. Color or saturation will work if it's solid black. So you can see here in black and white, he's really getting lost in the background there. So I usually leave that layer up on top, and I'll periodically turn it on to figure out, you know, what needs to be separated out, what's getting lost. Because sometimes, you know, you might think, oh, well, I can see him pretty well. This is red. But really, if it works in values, then like the colors don't matter as much. Like, yes, you can use colors to help you separate something out, but it's best if your values already are, you know, popping out in a good way. So that's why I keep, you know, like adding more like lightness to this arm, so this pops out more. And you'll see I lighten the background a lot behind him, so he really pops out. So here's more of that blue light, starting with my second main light source, going, okay, you know, it'd be hitting the sides of here and the tops of these wrinkles and a little bit, you know, on the right sides of things since it's coming from the right. And more overall light. Just, you know, continually building up the details and the lighting and, you know, giving it more shape. Okay, and then we added some fog up on top. This is actually a smoke layer from Raw Exchange. I used a hue saturation colorized to make it sort of orange. Keep it that warm. So these layers are actually, they were behind. So this is what I'm talking about where, you know, you can really start to separate them out. And then even in black and white, you know, he's still popping off that background. Okay. And more fog, more smoke. Warming it up over here. And then this is where I replaced the rock on the left. This is another image from Raw Exchange. Darken that down. This is just a brightness contrast, but the brightness way down and the contrast up a bit. So you just get a little bit of these highlights from, you know, light that might be bouncing around and hitting the tops of the rock. And then, you know, I end up highlighting that edge later. There's that hand back again. And then I decided to, like I said, I kept kind of checking on the mouth area and then building details from there and using that as kind of the base of my idea. So I liked how I painted this to be like glowy and red. So I thought that, you know, the hands should maybe match that and have that same glowy look. So I'm just building up that effect. Again, the lighting on the hand. There's more overall smoke. Let's see what we got in here. Okay, so we put the rock on the right side. It's actually the same exact rock that's over here, but it's just much smaller and tilted differently. So I figured I could get away with it being copied. And there's another rock in the foreground, just creating some depth by having this one be darker than this one. And darken this all down a lot. And that was my second pass at things, and then I decided it was time to save another file and, you know, merge all of those tons of paint layers on him into one piece and then go to another file. So this is my third. Go back to the bottom again and just pop all these layers on. I think most of these are the same from the second file. This is where I really start to detail the skin a lot. Okay, so then I started going through, and now that I had, you know, a pretty good laydown of my colors and where my light was coming from, I knew I wanted to really have the skin have a lot of tiny little detail and some grit going on. So I ended up using elephant skin and putting a piece on there a bunch of times and just moving it around and kind of matching it up with things. Also, this is the eye I painted in there, so turn that on. So it's pretty subtle, but if you look in here, you can see I'm starting to add this like elephant skin texture over everything. And here is not as important because I knew there was going to be a lot of light and smoke and fire and stuff in front of it, so it's pretty rough there still, but I did spend a lot of time obviously on the face because that's a focal point. So somewhere, okay, here we go. So this is actually from an elephant's trunk, and then I kind of liquefied and warped to help it kind of match the flow of this arm. And, you know, because this is rounded, it's nice that it kind of mimics that. And it already had light on one side of the trunk, so it's really helping me a lot by giving me this highlight and all these natural little highlights on the little textures of it. And then obviously later, once I have this texture laid in, I go back in and I paint more, you know, warm light coming from in the side I want and blue light coming from one side, and really start to just like meld that texture in. So, and I pretty much used that same elephant trunk texture all over the whole body, and it took a very long time, but was super fun. Here's just some more painting on the face. You know, you can really see the little textures around the nose and stuff. Wanted to play up this lighting more of these sort of cracks around the mouth. And then this is where I start to use the elephant trunk texture. Just sort of roughly throwing it over there, but making sure the lines are going in the directions I want. So here, it's stretched a lot, and I keep going into the liquefy and pushing things a bit, and going back, seeing how it looks, going back to liquefy, and like tucking it in around the eye, and just so I can help it give the face some shape. Down here. So yeah, I just kept layering up more and more. Oh, I did go back in. I ended up pen tooling all of these teeth because I knew I wanted to do a lot of fine detail painting on those because they would have a little edge light from this bright red like mouth cracks. So I thought it's going to be so much easier if I have a selection of these teeth that I can keep applying like layer clipping mask down onto, so I can paint and do what I want, and it'll be much faster than if I were to actually try and paint each edge and not have these teeth keep getting bigger and bigger as I paint on them and that sort of thing. So anyway, I pen tooled out all the teeth, filled them in with just a gray color, and then started shading them, and then adding the highlights, looking at where the light, again, looking at where the light's coming from and where these edge lights are going to be, just kind of melding those in with the face. So here I was really playing up that warm light from below, and just looking at how it would hit different areas. And more texturing. Again, this is that very same elephant picture. Some down on the leg. All of this work was somewhat wasted because I ended up completely replacing the legs. That's a good piece on the forehead. So it's nice that, like, yes, this is a digital painting, but by throwing this texture on top and then, painting on it more and more, it's like half painting, half picture, and which is kind of my thing anyway, to be somewhere in the middle. But this was definitely different for me since my subject I completely created for the most part, rather than just taking a picture of someone and then editing them. I had to figure out how they were standing, what they looked like, what the details were, and then build it up from there. So here's more texture on the shoulder, the chest, around the neck, doing a lot more of these wrinkles and things. Yeah, I really, really liked working with that elephant skin texture. And this was actually a different picture of an elephant's eye, so I already had all of the details of around the socket and that sort of thing that I could blend into there. And more little detail texture on the face. And then this is where I zoom way in and note that I've even downsized this file a lot so I could combine all of my different files together. So there's technically way less pixels here than there were when I was actually working on it than in my other master file. So the detail's not quite as fine as if I had it at full resolution, but for this video, you get what I'm doing here. So I would go in, and this I could do for hours, and it was so much fun. And in fact, I did do for hours where I just, look at, okay, warm light from here, cool light from here, and just paint in, highlighting the texture and blending it in with the rest. And I do that a bunch more throughout. That was just kind of my first little pass. And more fog. There's that smoke, warming it up. Here's the rock. Hand again. Again, this, just reminding you that this is the third version I've saved. So a lot of these layers you saw in version 2, I'm just turning them back on for this file. More fog, and the rock on the right. So that's the third. Here was the second. So you can see that we took a big leap in detail, adding that elephant skin and starting to meld that in with the image. So we will move on to my fourth saved file. I ended up redoing the background. I wasn't really liking it, the way it looked, and I kind of lost the feel of the cave, so I reworked that, darken that down. We'll add those in a minute. So, where is the monster? Here we go. So there's our torso. And this is where I really start to brighten up behind him a ton so he can really pop off the background. More smoke. You know, this is just an overlay layer with orange paint. Here's a normal layer with a really light, warm color. And then some fire layers, little sparks and embers. And then let's find that rock up on top so we can make this look right. There we go. So that, and the hand. More fire. And then if I remember correctly, this is when I redid the legs. I decided that he was just looking a little too humanoid, like it was just arms, legs, you know, too normal. And since this was a creature creation contest, I thought, well, that's not very creative to just have normal legs and, you know, fairly normal arms. Like, yeah, he's got pointy, glowy fingers, but I thought it would be kind of cool if he had some spider legs. So I kind of roughed those in. I also added ears. There we go. So I painted in these like bat looking ears, which I liked, kind of looking at the texture on the skin and kind of copying that motion of things and giving it different elements and details that would kind of tie it in with the rest of the look, so it was more, you know, believable. So this layer, when I start to wrap this light around and blend the rock in with the rest of the lighting. It's more overall painting and shading. Like I said, I'm just sort of digging my way through these layers and figuring out what I was doing and sort of talking it through as I go. So sorry if it's all over the place, but hopefully you will learn something from this if you choose to watch it. More sparks. And now here's another layer, like I was saying earlier, where I go in and paint in, and this is just a normal layer, and I would select like a bright yellow from one of these fire pieces and start going, okay, well, there's all these little bumps and textures that would be catching light on the bottom side. And it just really is a cool effect. And like I said, it's really fun. You can really see in the hand here starting to play up the texture I added. And then there's more. This is an overlay layer, painting with red, really helping my lighting effects and just layering up to get more light out of the mouth area. Same here. I think I actually just duplicated that layer and painted a bit more on it. You know, just making these weird cracks in his body that are emitting this magic light a bit more glowy. And also, you know, this is my main subject. I want you to look here at the face. So by having this be a really bright area and it's so red, it really kind of draws your eye in. And a bit more fog. He was looking too much like the same darkness as this rock, but he's much farther back and there's all this smoke and stuff from the fire, so he would be much lighter. And there's that front leg. So anyway, that's somewhere in here is about my fourth iteration, which again, you know, we took some big leaps, adding in the ears and the eyes changed, and then, you know, started fleshing out where these spidery legs are going to be. And then we'll go to the fifth save. Okay, so here I've merged that background layer and I ended up just stretching it down. Normally it's not great to transform something and lose your proportions, but because it's blurry and it's in the background, I decided I could get away with it. So unfortunately, I already merged a bunch, so you can't see a lot of the like painting and detailing of the spider legs, but you get the general idea of it. So I, again, just took that same elephant skin texture and piece by piece kind of wrapped it around these legs. Let's see if we can't find the monster again. There we go. So obviously this looks totally crazy, but there will be that rock in front of it. Which is, where's that rock? Well, there's one I added down at the bottom. Well, I guess we'll just start at the bottom and work our way up. There's more lighting, and again going, okay, this leg is farther away than this leg, so it's going to be lighter, and I want it to be a little behind this arm, so it's going to be even lighter than that. So I'm, just adding more fog and smoke in front of that, and that's just a normal layer, selecting a light color from the background and just painting it on. Some more of that light from below on an overlay layer, and again, this was, this knee here was darker than this knee, which is much closer, so I needed to make sure that that was lighter, but still a little darker than this one, which is farther away, so just kind of keep working back and forth. And some more fire and smoke. I think these are from previous file that you already saw. There's the rock. So then kind of added some dust and light coming from behind him there, adding a bunch of texture to the background. And then somewhere in there, I seem to have turned on the layer where I ended up duplicating the eye. I was thinking it'd be kind of, again, interesting to have it not just have normal 2 arms, 2 legs, or 2 eyes. So I thought, well, I'll go with 6 eyes, and even though you can only see 3, sort of 4 of the legs, I'm intending for there to be 6 legs, just to go off of, like I said, I kept checking in on the mouth and going, okay, well, there's 3 of these things on the mouth, so we'll have, eyes in patches of 3 and 6 legs, and, like the 3 main fingers. Granted, yes, there's 4 in the hand, but you get what I mean. And then also, I was looking at the hand and going how, okay, well, we have all of the pointy parts of the body are glowing red, so I ended up turning these red somewhere back in here. They were, they had the light from the mouth, but I wanted them to actually have their own glowing red light to match the fingers, and just continue that throughout the image. And then I started working on this on the right. Like I said, I knew I was going to have this person here who was sort of glowing blue, and that's the light on the face and the hand and stuff. So somewhere, here she is. And like I said, I ended up just for file size and all that, I built her in another file of her own and then brought it in here. This is actually a recycled image of my friend Lauren from Lauren Schmidt Photography in a pink dress in a cave in Wales. So I thought, this is more about the monster, but I want someone here, and I really love the motion that she had with the dress and everything, so it kind of looked like she was going in this direction. So I ended up just reusing that, turning it blue, and painting a new face on there, looking in the direction I needed, and then doing some like smoke hair just to make her sort of magic smoke elf. Who knows? So then I used little particles kind of trailing off her again to just give her more motion. And then this is an overlay. I wanted her to almost have some glowing light coming off of her, and then I decided, well, maybe she has some magic in her hand that's causing a flare, and that would really sell that the light is getting over to land on him. So I used a flare again from Raw Exchange and just set it to soft light. I'm sorry, not soft light. I do 1 to screen and then 1 to soft light. Sometimes the screen one, I feel like it just gets kind of washed out. So if you duplicate it and leave it right where it is, set it to soft light, and then I turn the opacity way down to 20. It just sort of adds some of the darkness and richness back in and kind of saturates the colors a little bit. So that's something I do a lot when I add textures or light on top of something. I tend to stack up a couple blending modes. But that's sort of the base of my little hero over here coming to face the giant monster. And more fog, just separating things out. You know, I wanted this leg to be in front of here, so I kind of lightened there a bit. And here's more texture that I also used to darken it a bit. It's very subtle, but I added some particles and then I motion blurred them, and they're kind of going at the same angle that I want her to be heading at. So it just kind of gives the image a bit of motion and action, even though it's a still image. Same with this. Did some particles. These are actually dust images from Raw Exchange, and then applied that same motion blur in the direction, you know, angle that she's heading, sort of like bottom right heading up towards the left, and just giving it a bit more texture and motion and action and grit in the air. And like I keep saying, I was kind of looking and going, okay, well, this rock in the foreground's getting lost. I want to separate this rock from this rock and, you know, just push that back into the image a bit more. So I just added a normal layer with a very, very light blue gradient coming from right to left. Just lightening that up a bit. There's some more sparks. And then I painted some warm light onto this rock over here. Even though I want it to be blue light on the right, orange light on the left, this is so bright over here, it would be casting some light on this rock in the foreground. So I did that. And then somewhere down in here, I start using, okay, well, if this light is here, it's going to cast light on the rocks around her and help separate this out and give it some more depth. And then also warm it up a little bit just around up in here, because there's a lot of warm light that would be bouncing around. So it wouldn't be totally blue on the right. And again, with any composite or digital painting you're doing, just constantly looking at what would the light be doing and then painting accordingly. So I was looking at this and going, well, that's pretty flat and dark, but there's all this light down here, so it would be lighter. So I started building that up, giving some warm light below. And then some smoke behind, again, to separate this from the background. If we turn this black layer back on, just to check the values. So you can see that really starts to pop that off the background. It doesn't really blend in as much. And then same with here, just adding a bit more separation, sort of smoke going on there. Turn that back off. And some more particles up on top of the monster, but behind this leg, just to kind of create more depth, that this leg's in front of here and there's fire behind, so it's coming up between. Darken that hand down a bit. It was looking a bit too bright and kind of drawing your eye over to here when I want you to look there, so just darken that a little. So from here on out, it's really just, you know, saving it, closing it, looking at it the next day, seeing what you want to tweak and what jumps out at you. It's, you know, what needs a little bit more light or a little more shadow, what needs to be separated from the background or blend in a bit more, you know. So really just a lot of fine detail. I think in here, yeah, I kind of reworked this hand because I realized it just was such a different texture than everything else. And I wanted it to continue that sort of elephant texture. So I came back in here and very meticulously put in the elephant texture over all these fingers and hands. And then really making that edge light pop, showing that there's this very bright light coming from below and kind of helping to separate out the fingers and the hand a bit. I think we, come over here and do the same with this hand, adding the elephant texture in there. And a lot of times, you know, you can get away with there being less detail. Like if you really focus on the face, you know, there's way less detail in here. Like if you get in there, like this is kind of messy and rough, but there's enough going on that like you don't really need to look there. So yeah, you could probably get away without having this really fine detail on the hands, but because I had the time, and again, you know, this is for a contest, I really wanted to take the time to play up all the tiny little details. And more light on the mouth area, just making things pop and adding shape and dimension to it. It was looking a little flat, so this kind of gives it some more depth. And more fire on the body. Here's some more just separating things out. This leg I wanted to pop into the foreground a bit more, so I lightened up behind it. Same with here, lightening behind the mouth thing. Kind of pushed this ear back on that side of the head that was a bit farther away than this ear. And these are just, you know, normal layers, selecting colors and painting with a soft brush at maybe like 10% opacity. And then doing some detail painting on this leg, looking at where the light's coming from and adding the highlights accordingly. And more overall painting. This is an overlay layer. Really just making different things pop, adding some light to, you know, the ground around her, and more light on his hand from her blue magic. So just really, like I said, from here on out, it's a lot of just digital painting at this point. I decided it'd be cool if, you know, this edge was looking a little flat and boring, if he had little hairs. This is much easier to see in the full resolution version because they're like everywhere. There's really tiny little hairs and details. So I thought that even though it has, you know, kind of like a scaly, rough texture, I thought by having that sort of softness would make it look a bit more real. And they're all throughout. And some bokeh with a bokeh brush. It's pretty subtle, but it just gives some texture and variation to the light. And in areas like this, I had little red ones just to give the overall image a bit more something something. And some dust particles. If you know my work at all, you know I love particles. So I add them to everything. There's already a ton in there, but I added a bit more just to meld everything together. And, you know, there's this fire, so there's going to be little sparks and dust being kicked up and everything. So, and then some color work. Making things, I like things to be a bit more saturated and colorful than they actually might be. So like, yeah, this is maybe a bit more believable, but I like to push things into a very bright look. And I thought it'd be neat if she had some butterflies trailing off. Why? Because magic. So she's got little glowy butterflies. Okay, and then our last, added a bit more details. And I did a liquefy, like flattened and merged everything. This is my sixth save where I flattened the fifth one and saved an alternate version, and then, like I said, did an overall liquefy just to fix a few things. This hand was a little bit big. Thought the chest was looking a little like skinny in a weird way, so I kind of rounded that out. I made the eyes a bit more angry looking. They looked a little shocked, and then, you know, just rounded out the face a bit more. Just kind of going around and shoving things this way and that to fix, you know, like this was a little too bulbous here and big compared to how skinny the leg was there. And, you know, you don't want to do too much because when you do liquefy, it will lose some of your detail. But it also, because this is essentially a composite painting thing, it will meld things and kind of blur them a little bit. So it just kind of makes it a bit more, everything married together a bit. And I lightened it all a tiny bit. Ended up just fixing around in here. This line kind of met up with this. I didn't like how that looked. So really at this point, it's just very nitty gritty things and fixing little tiny things. Did more painting and separating around these mouth claws. You know, making the eyes glow. Little finishing details. Thought it'd be cool if it had some drool coming out, so I just painted that in on top. And I put a little rock up here just to kind of create, stop you from escaping the image this way, how this like light line kind of leads you out of the image, but by having this dark line kind of swing you back around this way so your eye kind of swirls around in here and doesn't escape out there. And really it's like, I don't want anyone to, there's nothing to look up there, so if it's a bit darker it kind of frames it nicely. And that is about it. Did just, very fine tiny fixes around the eye. Just didn't like that bright spot. Lightened it one more time a tiny bit, and that's it. So I hope this was informative and not too crazy all over the place, but that is generally what I did to arrive at my version of the Terror of Undermountain. So hope you enjoyed this, and I'll talk to you next time. Thanks, guys.